but something about her felt wrong, as if she didn't belong there. I decided not to stare, focusing instead on the tiled walls, their glossy surface reflecting the dim, inconsistent light. Then came the announcement. The last train would arrive in 5 minutes. The air felt heavier, as though the walls themselves held their breath, waiting. I glanced down the dark tunnel, the faint hum of electricity creating a rhythmic buzz. It was then that I noticed the woman was no longer on the bench. My heart quickened as I scanned the platform, searching for her. She couldn't have disappeared without making a sound, could she? I told myself I was imagining things, that perhaps she'd walked away while I wasn't looking. The train arrived with a deafening screech, its headlights piercing through the dark tunnel. The doors hissed open, but to my surprise, the car was completely empty. It wasn't unusual at this hour, but the sheer stillness unnerved me. I stepped inside, choosing a seat near the middle, the fluorescent lights above humming softly. The train began to move, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels echoing in the near-silent cabin. Minutes passed, and I found myself staring at the windows, the darkness outside so complete it felt like staring into a void. My reflection looked pale, ghostly even, and I quickly averted my gaze. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite place it. The train speed began to decrease, though no station was in sight. I leaned forward, peering down the aisle as the cabin lights flickered violently. The train screeched to a halt, throwing me slightly off balance, the sound reverberating in my chest. When the lights stabilized, I noticed I wasn't alone anymore. At the far end of the car, a figure stood motionless, its back turned to me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The figure's posture was unnaturally rigid, its head tilted slightly to the side, as though listening to something I couldn't hear. The train began to move again, but the figure remained still, its reflection distorted in the glass. Summoning courage, I called out, "Excuse me, are you all right?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The figure's head jerked violently, as though startled, but it didn't turn to face me. Instead, it moved deeper into the car, its step silent. My breath caught in my throat as I realized there was something wrong with the way it moved, almost gliding rather than walking. I decided to move to the next car, putting as much distance between us as possible. The door was heavier than I expected, and the cold air rushed in as I passed through. The next car was identical, but mercifully empty. I collapsed onto a seat, my heart pounding and my hands trembling. I told myself it was nothing, perhaps a fellow passenger with a strange gait, nothing to fear. The train began to slow again, this time stopping completely. The lights flickered more violently, plunging the cabin into brief moments of darkness. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see where we were, but the view offered nothing but blackness. The train shouldn't have stopped here, I thought. This wasn't a station. The intercom crackled to life, a distorted voice murmuring something unintelligible before falling silent again. A soft knock echoed behind me. I turned sharply, my eyes widening, as I saw a hand pressed against the glass of the door leading to the previous car. The figure was there, its face obscured, as though the shadows themselves clung to it. I stumbled backward, panic coursing through me as the door began to slide open slowly. "Stay away," I stammered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my pounding heart. The figure stepped into the car, and as the light flickered, I saw its face, or rather, the absence of one. It was blank, featureless, like a mannequin come to life. I turned and ran, moving to the next car, my breath ragged and my legs trembling. The cars felt endless, each one identical, yet each one carrying an overwhelming sense of dread. but there was no one to hear me. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just behind me. I turned slowly, tears streaming down my face as I faced the figure once more. It raised a hand, pointing to the seat beside me. Confused and terrified, I hesitated, unsure of what it wanted. Slowly, I sat down, my body trembling. The figure remained standing, its head tilting again, as though listening. Then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural whisper. "Do you hear them?" "Hear what?" I whispered back, barely able to form the words. "The others," it said, stepping closer. My ears strained, and slowly, I began to hear faint whispers, indistinct but growing louder. They seemed to come from all directions, filling the car, pressing against my skull. The figure leaned closer, its featureless face inches from mine. "You don't belong here," it hissed, before stepping back into the shadows. The whispers grew deafening, the lights flickering faster until they burst, plunging the train into total darkness. I screamed, covering my ears, as the whispers turned into wails, the sound unbearable. Then, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, I was back at the platform, the train nowhere in sight. The station was eerily quiet, the air still. My watch read 12:15 a.m. Shaken, I stumbled up the stairs, desperate to leave. As I reached the street, I glanced back, half expecting to see the figure. But the station was empty. To this day, I avoid the subway, haunted by the memories of that night. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers, faint but unmistakable, as though the train is calling me back.